This is certainly nothing, so here are some thoughts about the fourth dimension. Alright, so I was thinking about how, hold on, let me pee really quick. Yeah, come inside. Oh boy, thunder's coming. Anyway, so here's the thing. So the fourth dimension, number one, let's imagine a 3D movie. We got 3D characters, and they're looking at a thing in utter amazement. And then one of the characters snaps his finger for the audience, and he becomes a regular film 2D, or a regular 2023 film 2D. And now the where they were looking is now occupied by the only 3D object. And so he removed a dimension from everything in the room. So now they're continuing to see the 4D object, but now we are able to see it, its 3D representation, just like we were seeing them in 2D. And I was thinking about what that means to remove a dimension. So I often, when I think about the fourth dimension, I think about, as I try to wrap my mind around it, I think about the explanation that, that you look at the shadow of something and it's one dimension less. So, take an object, shine a light, you get a shadow, or actually what you're seeing, except imagine there aren't these light lines. So a 2D object for you now. Why shouldn't it be holding it? Okay, a 2D object for you now. And, okay, so I don't know how I was able to do that, but I did it. Now imagine that I took this 2D, imagine I'm Zach King, and now I turn this into, boom, a photo of a thing, and I turn it on its side, on its dimensionless side, and now when you look at it, you just see a line. Then I take that line, and you just see, so it's like this, but then I turned it on its dimensionless side, and now you just see a line. And then I take that line and I turn it on its dimensionless side, and now it's just a point. Okay, so for me, what's a 3D object here? So it's 3D, made it 2D, made it 1D, only having this, made it just this point here now, no dimensions. So this is just a location, really. It's not a thing, right? It has no width. It's just a location, a point in whatever dimensional space. So 3D space, or for you, 2D space, right? So there's an X coordinate and a Y coordinate, right? Okay, and for me, in 3D space, because I also have a Z coordinate, I have depth. Okay, so then I was thinking about depth. And so if in a 2D world, or in this video, it's 2D. And so for me, this and this occupy the same space, because I have no sense of this depth. So you move this and I'm like, oh, okay, there's that now. So for me, no, this is 1D. I'm existing in 2D, so I only see in one dimension. Okay? Which means I can't see this, and now I can see this. And for me, it's in the same one-dimensional space because I don't have this And then this is outside of my field of vision. This is outside my field of vision. Okay. So as a 3D thing, right, as a 3D thing, looking at this 2D world here, but you, the 3D being, these occupy the same space because you have no... On your screen, if you were to point at the lighter, you would be pointing at the cone, right? Now, of course, you can reconstruct my world here and imagine that, that this is, that, you know, and also you can see, okay, that's not an example, okay? So these occupy the same space. So this occupies this point, and now this occupies this point. And yet they are both able to exist. It's still here. They're both able to exist. But you are not able to, you're probably super confused, right? Looking at this image. First of all, you're like, what is going on with his fingers? They must be inside the cup. Be careful. Wait, yikes, what happened? How the hell did they not go? Yeah, there's a bottom. What? Why it is happening? You must be absolutely freaking out. How is this? Watch this. So now, obviously, my finger has to be in the cup, right? Okay, watch my finger get smaller. You're so confused. You're wondering, is it the cup making it smaller? Oh, look at the cup, it's getting bigger. You're so confused. And in actual reality, in my 3D space, these never occupied the same point. Never, I swear to you. Okay, my finger was never in the cup. Not in the cup right now. And you're like, what? How is that possible? All right, so that would be like a 4D being talking to us. So I guess in a 4D world, there are other things that exist in this space. I'm not able to perceive them because of my 3D light perception. If I were able, if a 4D, so what would have to happen? All right, forget that for a second. Because that's new. The other thing that I was thinking about was that, so when we imagine, so I can't, okay, so, hold on. All right, so here's the thing. Remember that whole demonstration about the shadow and all that? By the way, who am I to do this? Everything I'm saying is almost certainly wrong. But if anything, it can inspire people who don't know anything about physics in reality, like me, who, like me, don't know anything about physics in reality. Just, it's fun to just think about. Okay, so, remember this whole thing? And I was like, you know, every time I turn it on to its dimensionless thing, it becomes... you know, lose the dimension. All right, so what's interesting about that is if we do a shadow, light hitting a 3D object, its shadow will always be 2D. When we send light any way that we currently know how, its shadow will always be 2D. Which is kind of like... So we are not able to do this thing of where we turn it onto its dimensionless... No, it is already always on its dimensionless side. Because if we were able to shine light on it in a fourth dimensional way, then its shadow would be itself. So remember, we're never able to perceive the fourth dimension. As long as we understand how it works, we can just copy things somehow. I don't know what they'd be made of. I don't know. I don't understand any of that. But are you copying? I mean, you're not copying when you make a shadow. So I don't know. But here, let's so here's the thing. Oh, is this helpful? Right. So yeah, that's kind of like it. It's like I'm turning it. There's no way to turn it onto a dimension. No, I don't know. All right. So See, no. I really need something. I need a. Okay, so this here. Okay. So in order to drop it a dimension, I need to turn it onto its dimensionless side. So like this. Oh, gosh. Like a piece of paper or something. Or I'll just make a computer. It's pretty thin. All right. So okay. So let's assume that. All right. So this. All right. So this is a 3D object in my 3D world, but for you it is 2D because this is, you can only see 2 dimensions of my world. Because that's the only way that we know how to perceive and do light and stuff. Okay. Now, if I turn it on to its dimensionless side, it becomes just a line. Okay. But if I turn it like this, if I don't turn on its dimensionless side, it stays 2D. Yeah. So this is 2D for you. It's still 2D for you. And if I shine light in it like this, it'll form a rectangle just like this. And if I shine light in like this, it'll form a rectangle just like this. Okay. Which makes sense. Because only I, as a 3-dimensional being with this dimension, could possibly do this. Could possibly turn this object on this axis. Okay. So you're watching a 2D representation of a 3D being manipulating the 2D, or manipulating a 3D object in his 3D world, and you're just really fucking confused because it's like, whoa, that object just totally changed. And if you're imagining it, well, you can't. Yeah, so now you think, oh wow, that's changing size, changing size, changing size, changing size. Oh, it's just a line now. Okay, so my point is that if we're watching a 3D video of a 4D being who would be represented in 3D with a 4D object which would be represented in 3D, then this 4D being with its perceptual and existing powers in that 4th dimension would be able to turn that 4D object along that 4th axis, and it would look like magic to us. We would be like, whoa, that object just like really changed. Okay. So anyway, so the question is how to do this. Boom. How to shine light. Why can't we do this though? Huh? So we can turn a 3D object, and every way that light hits it for the shadow that we perceive, it will be 2D. So we are constantly hitting along the 4th axis, right? Because if I go like this, boom. Okay, so I dropped a dimension by turning it along the axis that you can't perceive. Yeah. Okay, so we have X, Y, and then Z. Okay? You can't perceive Z, so watch me turn it along Z. Okay. And that's how I was able to drop a dimension. And then if Y now is the only dimension, and then we look at it from Y, well, imagine, we look at it from y once we've dropped it, then it just becomes a point. So you look at it down the axis. Okay, so the w axis. So it's stupid. We should go the other way. Okay, so whatever now. Okay, so the w axis, it means that we are constantly, no matter what manipulation I do, I am looking at this object along the w axis, and that's why it loses the fourth dimension, because I am looking at it along that axis. So I'm only able to perceive the x, y, and z axes. And so just like how right now this is moving for me, right? I'm moving along. I'm moving, hold on, where are you? I'm moving along the z axis, okay? Okay. So I'm moving along the z axis. I have a question. Every movement along the x-axis, let's say x is the first axis. Okay. Then we have the y-axis. Now, is every movement along the x? No. But every movement on the y-axis is also not no. And every movement along the z-axis is also not. What was I going to say, though? But for some reason I was thinking that every movement is a movement. How is it that I am looking at this constantly through the w axis? What does that mean to be looking down the w axis? Couldn't possibly know. Couldn't possibly understand what it means to not look down the w axis. I can imagine what it's like to look down the z axis. And so now we're looking, you and I are both, as we look at this video, looking down the z axis. So we can only perceive x and y in the video. It shouldn't even be possible to conceptualize the fourth dimension. It isn't, probably. I don't think anybody has. Because we just don't have it's not because we haven't seen it, it's because we don't have any mechanisms for that. It just cannot compute. Only an artificial intelligence or a modified brain, you have to update the software for it to even be able to. So actually, we probably could, if you just modify the brain, we will be able to perceive in the fourth dimension. Or perceive the fourth dimension. Because we are perceiving in the fourth dimension. We're looking down the w axis here. But we're always looking down the w axis. Just like the thing in 1D space can only go like this. So he's always looking down the x-axis. He's stuck at, the thing looking at the x-axis, looking down the y-axis, can only move along the x-axis as we look down the y-axis. We can only move along the z-axis as we look down the w-axis. What does that mean? How does it make sense? this thing can only, as it's looking down the y-axis, no, oh, wait, its world is a line, so it can only, okay, so there's something that's world is the x-axis. They'll only just move along the x-axis. Some people's world is the xy plane. Our world is the xyz space. And then their world is the xyzw hyperspace or whatever, where things can share the same xyz coordinates, but they're not occupying the same point because they have different w coordinates. And that's why time is such an easy way to, or an easy, like, because if we imagine that there is a person here in 1730, a person here in 400, and so we are all occupying the same space, but they exist on a different part of the W axis. But somebody who was able to see right, but then if you took a photo superimposed, because there was no such thing as time, so everything existed all at once, then you would see a whole bunch of different things here. And you would be confused. And that's because the 4 dimensions got reduced to, well, 2 if it's a photo. But even if it's 3, we'd be very confused if you were here with me and you saw a whole bunch of different objects occupying this space. So that's why it's kind of easy when we imagine as time. But no, it's spatial. There's a spatial or hyperspatial 4th dimension that makes it such that rather than historical figures and future whatever, that this XYZ point that I'm occupying is likely occupied by other things, but we're not sharing the space because they're elsewhere on the W axis. Okay.